game as well. Maryland just had Syracuse by the horns the entire way of the game. The Orange were down 43-17 at halftime, the fewest points in a first half since 2018 for Syracuse, and that back in that year, 2018, Syracuse had just 16 against Duke. Also in that first half, Syracuse 12 turnovers. Maryland had 8 steals. You obviously can't be sloppy with the ball against a really good Maryland team. This is a team heading into this contest, had 9 wins in 11 games. Now, obviously, the Terrapins up to 10 wins. But still, this Terrapins team, even though it's not ranked, is really solid. And the fact that Syracuse was just giving them open opportunities at the basket off of fast breaks, off of turnovers, it's just not going to cut it. Syracuse ended the day with 21 turnovers. Yeesh. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Syracuse, in that first half, shot under 28% from the field, 1 for 6 from 3. They did sort of even things out as the game went on, finished with 43% from the field, 8 for 16 from 3 as well. So Syracuse showing a little bit of poise and some discipline from beyond the arc, finally showing that it can hit shots from deep. Lampkin led in that first half with 6 points. But again, just so many issues with this Syracuse team trying to find out its identity. Where does it go from here? And Austin and Jordan did an excellent job of kind of depicting that in the latter moments of this game. You get blown out last week to Georgetown, your biggest rival, in the 100th meeting, and you've had time and time again for Syracuse to reset and show that it is one of the top teams in the country. Now, I get you're without your star player in J.J. Starling, but someone has got to step up. In today's game, Donnie Freeman was second on the team with 15 points, 6 for 10 from the field. Also had the lone 2 free throws in this game for Syracuse. 2 for 2, as I just said, but only 2 free throws in this game for Syracuse. Are you kidding me? The Orange, that's where their bread and butter's at. Obviously, this game a little bit of an exception, shooting 8 for 16 from deep, but Syracuse makes its living from getting inside and getting points close to the basket and getting fouled going to the line. Syracuse only, like I said, 2 free throws, all belong to Donnie Freeman, who knocked down both of them. Elijah Moore led the team in points with 16 shots, 7 for 11 from the field, 2 for 3 from deep as well. And Jaquan Carlos played 40 minutes in this game. 40. And he had 4 assists, 2 points, 1 for 5 from the field as well. Who goes next, right? Who's going to be the guy to step up? Some people thought it was going to be Chris Bell. 2 points in today's game. 1 for 4 from the field. 0 for 1 from deep. Played 17 minutes, was a minus 28. Who is it going to be? And I'm sure for our double overtime, which you really want to stick around for, our Luke Burgess and Adam Gotkin will be sharing their thoughts and giving their insight on the game. So maybe they have some insight, some stuff that I can't really figure out as to who's going to take the torch for Syracuse. I mean, now you're 5-6 on the season. Where do the Orange go from here? We'll just have to wait and find out. Selton Miguel for the Terrapins led the team in points with 24, shot 8 for 11 from field and 6 for 9 from deep. And second on the team was Giuseppe, 17 points, 7 for 12 from the field as well. All right, that's enough talking about this game, sharing some stats for both teams in this contest. Long story short, it was a beatdown for Syracuse. All right, moving things along here in Orange overtime, let's check in some scores from around the nation. In the opening round of the college football playoffs, 6-seed Penn State is plowing 11-seed SMU 28-0 late in the second quarter. Mustangs QB Kevin Jennings has 3 interceptions on the afternoon. In ACC men's hoops action, 5th-ranked Duke leads Georgia Tech 77-54 in the final stages of the second half. Blue Devils guard Con Canopel is shooting 50% from downtown. Number 25, Clemson hosts Wake Forest at 2. The Tigers own the ACC's second-best three-point percentage at 38%. In other ranked hoops action, Xavier trails number 9 Marquette 63-59 with under 5 minutes to play. Golden Eagles forward David Joplin has 17 points and is shooting 50% from the floor. 11th ranked UConn has a 74-69 lead over Butler. With less than a minute to go in the second half, the Huskies rode their 17-4 opening run to a victory. At 4:30, number 2, Auburn hosts number 16, Purdue. The Tigers could be without three-time SEC Player of the Week, Janai Broom, who excited Tuesday's game with a shoulder injury. All right, that's enough checking in from the scores around the nation. Let's pause 10 seconds for station identification.
Hey, folks, I'm Jason Horowitz, voice of the Raiders in WAER Class of 2005. You're listening to the original home of the Orange, WAER Syracuse.
We're up against our first break here on Orange Overtime, but stick around. We still have more to go. We have full game highlights from both teams, or I guess you could call them lowlights for Syracuse in this contest. We also have our Pepsi Player of the Game to give out as well. Still a lot more on Orange Overtime. I'm Gino Antamarino. Stick around.
Starry Lemon Lime Flavored Soda. Starry hits different. Starry is a proud sponsor of Syracuse Athletics.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
Starry Lemon Lime Flavored Soda. Starry hits different. Starry is a proud sponsor of Syracuse Athletics.
The game has gone final. It's time to listen how it all went down. Radio Replay is up next on WAER.
That's absolutely right. Radio Replay coming up on Orange Overtime. Welcome into our Ostrom Avenue studios. I'm Gino Antamarino, attempting to break down what happened in this game just a few moments ago. Maryland absolutely handling business against Syracuse, 87-60. The Orange are now 5-6 on an overall record. But let's check in on how this all came out. You know, Syracuse from the start just was ugly. Syracuse began the contest just 1 for 4 from the floor. While he wasn't in the starting lineup, Orange freshman Elijah Moore, though, came in and was a spark plug immediately.
Feeds Moore left wing, uses a Lampkin screen down the alley, stops, pops from 15, and it's good. Elijah Moore, that's silky smooth. The freshman averaging 8 points per game. 5-4 the Maryland lead 4 minutes in.
That jumper cut the SU deficit to just 1, as you just heard from Austin, but Maryland would respond. The Terps' ensuing 7-0 run was capped off from downtown.
Nobody scored in a while. Syracuse over the last 5. Rice a 3. He's got it from the left wing. Rice, a 38% three-point shooter, connects. 12-4, the Terps lead. 13 minutes left in the first.
Since the 10-minute mark in the first half, the Maryland lead has hovered between 7 and 15. With the comfortable cushion, the Terps found themselves dominating the Orange no matter what they did.
Miguel, left wing. Hits Gillespie, top of the key. Fakes, drives down. Behind the back pass. Miguel, left wing 3. Oh, yeah! Oh, Maryland's just having fun with it in Barclays. 26-11, 6:20 to play in the first.
No matter what Syracuse did, it just wouldn't matter. Not only was everything working on offense for Maryland, the success came from both ends of the floor.
Double team, inside feed, Majstorovic turns around, swatted away by Reese. Oh, the eraser again. Here come the Terps, attacking the left hoop. Rodney Rice, kick. Three-pointer, Gillespie nails it. He puts it in from way downtown. 33-15, 2:45 to go.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the Orange struggled to protect the ball. Terps' Jordan Geronimo sent Maryland into the locker room with a statement.
It's stolen away. Gillespie, 1-on-2, hits Geronimo, who soars in for the dunk. Oh, he tickled the clouds. 1 second to go. Cuff jacks it up, and it's no good. Maryland's fans in the red and yellow stand and clap and cheer. What a pathetic first half for Syracuse.
What a pathetic first half. Was absolutely right, Austin. Syracuse failed to score 20 points in the first for the first time since the 2019-2020 season opener. Unfortunately, there was still another half to play, and it started just like its predecessor, complete Maryland dominance.
Gillespie goes right to left, tosses to Reese down low, and he slams it home. Gillespie with the float pass, Reese right down the alley. Julian Reese with the first 4 points for Maryland in the second half, already up 30 just a minute in to the second half.
If there was ever a day to make a name for yourself, today is that day for Terps guard Selton Miguel. Keep an ear out for his name later on in the Orange overtime. The senior hit 4 threes in the first half and at one point had outscored the entire Orange team by himself.
Maryland moving in transition all the way up to Rice. He dishes back out to Julian Reese. Another Selton Miguel three. He nails it. Reese just handed it off to Miguel. A left wing triple is good. 6 3-pointers for Miguel, 22 points. And Maryland up 53-19, 2 minutes into the second half.
Since the NCAA introduced the three-point line in the 1986-87 season, this year's Orange squad has the worst three-point percentage in program history. I'm going to say that one more time. Since 1986-1987, when the NCAA introduced the three-point line, this year's Orange squad has the worst three-point percentage in program history. With that said, SU forward Donnie Freeman used the long ball to spark a second-half rally.
Carlos trying to get down the lane, back out to Freeman. He pops from downtown, and he gets it to go. Donnie Freeman, 9 quick points in the first 10 minutes of the second half. But Syracuse still down 61-34, 11:30 to go in the second half.
Any hope of a respectable score was thrown out the window instantly. Everything was coming up for the Terps, both beyond the arc and from close range.
Passes all the way to the right wing to Gillespie, feeds the post with Reese against Majstorovic, an absolute mismatch, and Julian Reese gets it off the glass and in, plus the foul. I mean, if that's not more indicative of what's happened today, Julian Reese just bullying Majstorovic to the hoop. And won, 71-37. Syracuse down, 8:35 left to go in the game.
If there was ever such a thing as a moral victory, the final 7.5 minutes was that for Syracuse. At one point, the Orange strung together a 14-4 run filled with some surprising shots and slams.
Carlos inbounds to Lampkin. Lampkin bounce pass to Carlos down the alley. Back out to Lampkin. He pops from 3, and he gets it to go. Eddie Lampkin now 2 of 2 from three-point range on the year. Syracuse forces a turnover, and Donnie Freeman slams it home. A mini 9-0 run for Syracuse trims the deficit to 27.
Whoa.
77-50. Maryland on top with 5 minutes to go in the second half.
Trims the deficit to only 27. Syracuse maybe had a chance, but in the end, it was all Terps from start to finish. For the first time in the Adrian Autry era, the Orange fall below 500.
In a game that Syracuse desperately needed. They are yet to have a quad 1 win, and they still don't. Maryland thumps Syracuse 87-60 in the Gotham Classic. Syracuse's worst loss so far of the 2024 season.
And with that, it's time to give out our Pepsi Player of the Game. And for Syracuse fans, you might want to cover your ears for this one. It's obviously going to go to a Terrapins player, Selton Miguel. Played out of his mind in today's game. 24 points, 8 for 11 from the field, 6 for 9 from deep. Also had 2 free throws to go along with that as well. 2 boards, 2 assists, played 27 minutes, and was a plus 28. This was a guy that, really just dominated Syracuse from the start to the finish, and the Orange just had no answers. But some people that might have some answers is the double overtime hosts Luke Burgess and Adam Gotkin. But before we get there, we got some thank yous to give out, plus our next broadcast. That's going to be a football one. And so, if you're a little bit down in the dumps for basketball, you can reset with a pretty good Syracuse football program. That will be Friday, December 27th in the Holiday Bowl game, Syracuse taking on Washington State. Game is at 8 p.m. with a special hour-long McClurg remodeling countdown to kickoff at 7 o'clock. some thank yous to hand out. Luke Burgess doing everything you could possibly throw at him, producing, engineering, everything, also being a great friend as well. Shout out Luke Burgess. Another great friend, Josh Richardson, radio replay, cutting up all those calls, writing all the scripts and everything. Josh has been a true leader in this department this weekend as well, and the entire WAER sports desk as well. Thank you to everyone making sure that this broadcast took place, even though some Syracuse fans maybe hope it didn't, because it was, again, a blowout. Maryland 87, Syracuse 60, the Orange 5-6 on the season. They drop below 500. And to talk more about that, we send it over to our double overtime, which will take us up until 4 o'clock. Call us, 315-443-2011. I'm going to read that number one more time because I'm sure you guys have some thoughts to give out. 315-443-2011. Text us as well, 315-556-3929. You can tune into the stream on YouTube at WAER Sports Talk as well. Or you can send us tweets on Twitter, WAER Sports Talk on there as well. And Adam, obviously Luke will join you in just a second, but I mean, where does Syracuse move on from this? I mean, where do they go from here?
I don't know where to go from here because, Gino, my goodness, that was one of the worst losses that I think I've seen in a long time for this Syracuse team, because from the jump, you just knew that they had absolutely no chance. Maryland was not just a step above Syracuse, but maybe about 30 or 40 steps above. If we think about this in New York City standards, Syracuse is at street level. Maryland might as well have been at the top of the Empire State Building, because the Terps just defeated the Orange 87-60. Maryland led by 38 points with under 8 minutes to go. Syracuse was lucky that it wasn't a bigger deficit at the end of this game, because that was just absolutely atrocious. There's no other way to put it. That was just straight up awful. If the Orange can't beat Wake Forest on New Year's Eve, who's 9-3, Syracuse will be below 500 at the turn of the calendar for the first time in 56 years. Folks, that's where we are with this program right now. This is the worst that things have been in a long, long time. This is the worst that things have been in most of our lifetimes, and unfortunately, we've got to talk about it for the next almost 2 hours. We'll be on the air here on the double overtime until 4 p.m. I'm very interested to see what Adrian Autry has to say after this game, because he said that this team hasn't lived up to its standards so far this year. I'm sure as heck they did not live up to those standards today. Our reporter Jonah Weintraub will be in the press conference. He'll join us live from the Barclays Center. My co-host Luke Burgess will join us in just a minute as well. Don't go anywhere, anyone. It's the double overtime, and it starts right now.
The game may be over, but our coverage on WAER is not. Here on the double overtime, we'll be breaking down all the highs.
Copeland, left wing three! It's good! Quadir Copeland wins the game for Syracuse! For the first time in 1,856 days, Syracuse beats an AP Top 10 team.
Darling drives to his right, puts up a layup. No, but Copeland with the putback slam. Oh my goodness, Quadir Copeland makes a statement.
And the lows.
Syracuse walked into John Paul Jones Arena looking to make a statement. And Virginia said, oh no you don't. Cavaliers 84, Orange 62, your final.
Well, Syracuse heads into North Carolina and faces its worst loss in its history in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Heartbreaking. The Orange bow out in the second round of the ACC tournament for the second year in a row.
Delivering our hottest takes along the way.
The expectations should be higher after a few years when Adrian Autry sets that bar, but the bar is still low.
5-star, Donnie Freeman. Yep. I mean, this guy has the tools. I think he could be the truth.
I think Lampkin and the combination of him and Carlos will rejuvenize this team and make them an actual complete basketball team.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or check out our YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. It's the double overtime, and it starts right now.
Welcome in to the double overtime here on WAER after Syracuse's 87-60 60 loss to Maryland. The Orange just got straight up embarrassed. No other way to put it. Adam Gotkin and Luke Burgess breaking down the loss here on the Double Overtime until 4 p.m. If you want to vent, if you want to rant, if you want to get your voice heard, you can call in at 315-443-2011 or text us at 315-556-3929. We're also on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk. Our YouTube is up at WAER Sports Talk. We want to hear from you because, my goodness, Luke, that was just a joke.
Yeah, there's really not much to say, is there? I mean, you lose your biggest rivalry. Well, maybe there's a lot to say, but you lose your biggest rivalry game of the week, or of the year rather, last week against Georgetown, the 100th all-time meeting, and you get flat out embarrassed. And this Maryland game is really a chance to prove something. I mean, if you listen to our coverage in Countdown to Tip-Off, you would have heard a little bit about how this was a chance for Donnie Freeman to go up against another good freshman and really kind of solidify himself as, like, I'm a guy too. You know, I was a top recruit. I mean, Queen didn't even have that good of a game.
Yeah.
But Maryland just absolutely ran Syracuse out of the building, Adam. And it was, Austin touched on it at the end of the game. From start to finish, there was nothing positive about this one. Syracuse was not ready to play. And, I mean, this is an embarrassment for the program. This game was on ESPN. It was on our WAER airwaves, as every game is. But this was on national television, right? The 12 o'clock slot. You had College Game Day this morning. Breaking down the college football playoff. A lot of people watching that. I'm sure people stuck around and watched this game. And I guarantee you they're not going to watch another Syracuse game this year.
No.
Because that was embarrassing as hell. There's no other way to say it.
And look, this is a good Maryland team. Let's not get away from that. Maryland now 10-2 on the season. Highest point differential in the country. Their only 2 losses against ranked teams, against very, very good ranked teams. And, you know, it's just an absolute joke, the fact that this team can't even look competitive at all. We've got someone who wants to talk Maryland on the phone lines right now. Kangas, what do you got after this game?
Man, I'm buying my tickets to San Antonio right now. Oh, my gosh. That was B to A all day, man. Delton Miguel, he got his three-point shot going. I don't know who's going to beat us right now. I mean, after watching that game, how can you think anybody is beating Maryland?
I'm guessing we got a big Maryland fan on the line right here. Now, look, this was just domination from start to finish. I mean, did you think coming into this game, you see Syracuse on the schedule? I know Maryland had been dominating coming into this game. I mean, did you think the Terps could have done this and beat another Power 5 team by 27?
Oh, I think we
might have lost Kangas.
What I want to say, what I was going to ask to Kangas, and I want to touch on real quickly, is all of a sudden, the way that things have gone over the last 2 weeks for Syracuse, do you even consider Syracuse a big win anymore? Does Maryland even care? Or does this just kind of go along with their wins against Bucknell, Alcorn State, Ohio State? I mean, they beat Ohio State by 20-some points, and they beat Syracuse by about the same margin, and it's like, yeah, it's just kind of another win.
Yeah,
Syracuse is just not a good program, so I don't know how you don't just toss those wins with the other ones.
Yeah,
we got another guy on the line here. We got
Keith on the line right now.
Keith wants to talk about lack of prep. Keith, what you got?
Hey guys, I gotta say I'll accept any day that Maryland's a better team than us on paper.
Sure,
but we had a week to prepare for this game, and the lack of preparedness was stunning to me, and the lack of creativity. When you've got a team that can't shoot fundamentally, and all four out of 5 guys are standing around the three-point line, no one's breaking to the hoop, no one's going to the hoop and dishing off to other people or looking for open opportunities. What do you expect is going to happen? We're going to get run out of the gym every single time. And I'm just shocked that, yes, Maryland is a better team, but to put this kind of a showing down is unacceptable.
I mean, Keith, I want to agree with you and just build off the point. Jaquan Carlos was brought into this team this year as a passer, right? As a guy to facilitate the offense. And there were a lot of possessions today where he was almost dribbling out half the shot clock before he did anything with the ball. And I'm fully in agreement. I don't understand why a team that, sure, Adrian Autry perceived them to be a good shooting team at the beginning of the year. They're clearly not that. They're one of the worst shooting teams maybe in the country in terms of Power 4. And for some reason, there seems to still be a reluctance to draw up plays and make something happen, like you just said, like attack the lane. You have Donnie Freeman, who's supposedly a top freshman, although he doesn't even seem to be playing a lot of the minutes in these games that he should be playing. And you're absolutely right. It's a stagnant offense, but it's not something new, right? This is something that we really have been talking about since early November when the season started 2 months ago. It's just the conversation then was, oh, it's going to change when they get deeper into the season as they get more reps. It hasn't changed, and I think, yeah, it's absolutely frustrating.
We're sliding down the opposite side of the slope right now. It's not going to get any better. If anything, it's going to get worse because week in and week out, we're going on the opposite end of good. And when you know you can't shoot, you got to create easy baskets. You got to create easy opportunities. Pump fakes, find somebody who's open in the lane. But when you're standing around the three-point shot when we can't hit the broadside of a barn, that's never going to be successful.
No, it never is, Keith. We really appreciate the call. If anyone else wants to get their voice heard here on the Double Overtime, you can call in at 315-443-2011. And Luke, something that Keith brought up there was the fact that this entire offense was just standing outside the three-point line. It looked like there was no direction. I didn't understand, just in the first place, the starting lineup coming into this game of
it seemed like there was a mistake.
The three bigs of Freeman, Davis, and Lampkin going up against a team that has two of the best bigs in the country in Derek Queen and Julian Reese. And so what do? They put in bigs on offense, or they put in a lot of bigs to try and attack bigs down low, but then on offense they're passing it around quickly, trying to find open threes. Like there was no direction.
I mean, so Jair Davis started this game. He got subbed out less than 2 minutes in. To me, that just tells me that there's major issues, right, with like the fact that the lineup wasn't set correctly. And that was something that Austin Jordan talked about as well. And so, yeah, it's worrying. I mean, we can talk about the coaching all day. We got another caller on the line. So we've got Ben from Gaithersburg who wants to talk about Maryland's play. Ben, what you got?
Hey, man, just got back really from watching that game, which, of course, for my sake, I'm very happy about a dominating win.
Ben, you there?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Guys,
I think we lost. I'm sorry about that, guys.
Yeah,
but
we lost Ben. Ben,
I mean, this is just
another
awful.
Maryland fan, right?
Yeah.
Coming in and talking about how happy they are with a dominating win. And I want to get back to the point that we were talking about Adrian Autry, because there obviously just was no plan at the outset of this game. And we've got a quote from Adrian Autry. He said, a good ass whooping. We got our asses kicked. Excuse my language. Nothing else to say. We didn't show up. We didn't play the way that we're supposed to play. Not much to say. We just got our asses kicked.
That's not, it's a joke at this point. I mean,
we've been saying this for weeks.
After what was it, the Wake Forest game last year, when Autry goes into the press conference after they lose by almost 30, and he says, "This is embarrassing." Multiple times this season, he said, "This isn't the standard. This isn't good enough."
Not Syracuse basketball.
Yes, it's not. And
more
whose
and more,
reason
though,
is that?
More and more, it seems like it is Syracuse
Yes,
basketball.
I mean, this is a joke.
As the head coach of this team, Adrian Autry, you control the brand. The brand is what you make it. And, I mean, clearly right now it's just not there. I don't really know what has to happen. I mean, we're going to obviously talk about what we think has to happen, but you think with a week to prepare, that was something that Keith brought up as well, right? A week to prepare coming into this game. I mean, you have to have a fundamental understanding. If regular people can have an understanding that you're not going to compete in this game unless you do something creative and have some advantage over this Maryland team. If you were listening to Sports Night last night, you would have heard Adam and Sam talk about the fact with Jonah, who's going to join us a little later on, that Syracuse really had no matchup advantage over Maryland at all. So they had to do something to exploit a certain part of the game that they thought that they could maybe gain an edge in.
And they tried to go big. Why? They started the three bigs to try and go at Maryland's biggest advantage?
Exactly. Like, chip away at the things you can actually maybe get some type of leverage on. Don't go after the one thing that this team has made its bread and butter on.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team in Maryland that's played a bunch of close games. They have not lost a game. They've only lost twice. Purdue and Marquette, two ranked teams. And they haven't lost a game by double digits all year. You had to expect that they were going to play you tough. And, I mean, yeah, it just didn't turn out good today. There's nothing else to say.
Not good at all. We've got someone else who wants to talk about their frustrations with this game. Ron from Syracuse. Ron, what do you got?
Hi, guys. It's been a tough watching. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what the answer is. But I'll tell you. Guys, yeah, it's I started watching on TV and I couldn't really watch it, so I switched over and it was really hard to listen to with you guys. I don't know what the answer is and stuff, but I'll tell you what. If it was a fight, they would throw in the towel and stop the thing. So I don't know what the answer is, guys.
Yeah, Ron, it's just bad. Ron, have you ever had this feeling before about Syracuse basketball? Like this, just hopeless about this team?
No, I'm a longtime fan. I've both football and basketball, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It's like the team is lost, or hard to say.
Yeah, I talked about this at the very beginning, Ron, that if they don't beat Wake Forest on New Year's Eve, then they'll be under 500 at New Year's for the first time in 56 years. It's just absurd. This is going down right now a path of something that we haven't seen in Syracuse in a long, long time.
Yeah, again, don't know, guys, but I hope they can turn it around, but it don't seem like they will be able to. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Ron. Appreciate your call. One of the things I kind of want to add on with Ron, what he said is, I don't think that Adrian Autry knows what to do. He's saying, I don't know what we need to do in terms of Syracuse. Well, I don't think Adrian Autry has a clue.
Tells you everything you need to know.
It's just been the same thing. A UAlbany game where, if you look at Syracuse's last 5 games, Adam, Tennessee, Notre Dame, UAlbany, Georgetown, and Maryland. The one win out of those 5 games, I think a lot of Syracuse fans would be embarrassed enough that they've only had one win in their last 5, no matter who the opponents are. But the one win was against UAlbany, 102-85. And the first thing that Adrian Autry brought up after the game was that he thought they regressed defensively from Notre Dame. So in terms of the coach, there's been no positives, essentially, over these last 5 games. Because UAlbany was a team that Syracuse was favored to beat by double digits, rightfully so. It's UAlbany. That's a bye game.
Yeah, it's just it's bad. It's so bad.
There's been no positive takeaways in any of those press conferences, and at some point you got to start to wonder, when does this swing? And if it doesn't swing, what's the answer? Because, regardless of what you want to talk about, the final years of Boeheim, a little bit of regression year to year, sure. Boeheim did not have a good few final years, and people knew that it was maybe his time to go, but
this is
the
step past
answers
that.
are not there right now. Whatever solution you went to trying to remedy those issues, it has not come.
If it was a pretty, small slope down at the last couple of years of Boeheim and last year,
they won
first
20
year of
games
Autry,
last year. There's no reason to regress.
They won 20 games, but they didn't look great. I agree, there wasn't a reason to regress if you think about this being the normal Syracuse program, and if this was a normal Boeheim team, they would have been able to figure things out, but it's not. This is a new era of Syracuse basketball, and this era of Syracuse basketball seems like just doesn't have a coach who knows how to prepare for games or to make adjustments. We had our caller earlier, Keith, talk about the lack of prep coming into this game. I want to dive a little bit more into just the start, and especially the start offensively. Yeah. 6 turnovers in the first 7 minutes. There was literally just nothing going right. They were playing a little different offensively than they had in the past. They were trying to really move around quickly and swing it around, and that just didn't work. They could not hold on to the ball. They just turned it over time and time again. Jay Williams said it a number of times on the broadcast that every single pass was being telegraphed and that it was just so easy for Maryland to steal it. At the start, they just didn't look like they just wanted to be there.
And whatever the plan of execution is going in, we get a little bit of insight because for the Get His Federal Coaches Report, Tyler Aiken, he sits down with Alan Griffin before every game. One of the things that assistant coach Griffin was talking about numerous times throughout the coaches report today was how important it was to win the turnover battle and not turn the ball over. And at one point in this game, Syracuse was losing 9-0 in the turnover margin.
That 21-13.
That is unacceptable. You give away the first 9 turnovers of the game?
Maryland had 18 points off of turnovers in the first half.
And if that is one of your game plans going in, like I said, I don't know what the long-term outlook is, but how can that instill confidence in this coaching staff for fans, for players, for anyone in the athletic department? Because it's like the one thing that you wanted to achieve. I mean, that was the focal point of his talk today.
And Luke,
Syracuse got obliterated in that aspect.
Maryland had more points off of turnovers than Syracuse had points in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, that's just unacceptable.
It is.
There's no direction.
It is just absolutely unacceptable. They couldn't score. Like they legitimately just couldn't score. Nothing was working. They couldn't get anything going. I mean, they put the bigs in. Donnie Freeman doesn't score in the first half. Eddie Lampkin has just 6 points, and Jair Davis has 0 points in the first half.
I mean,
like Davis didn't do anything.
We haven't
in
even
there.
talked about the fact that Syracuse didn't even have a free throw until the waning moments of the second
No.
half.
So you put those bigs in, you would think, okay,
try and create contact down low. Draw some fouls.
Exactly. Can't even draw a single foul. You don't get a single free throw until, what was it, like just over 5 minutes left? The first free throw came with 5 minutes and 24 seconds left in the game. And at that point, I mean, if that is really when you're shooting your first free throw when you're starting 3 bigs, it's just a joke. I mean, there's just a lack of fight. There's a lack of effort inside. There's a lack of everything. But if you can at least be trying to like bang bodies down low when you're down and just get to the free throw line, I mean,
which one is the biggest for you? Like, which aspect is this team lacking in the most? Because to me, it's direction.
Yes.
I just don't see any direction. I don't know what the game plan is, because all year coming in to the season, we heard the refrain that Syracuse was going to be a good 3-point shooting team from the coaching staff, and they're not.
Like they kind of were today, 43%.
Sure.
50%. Sorry, 50% from 3 today.
I mean,
Pretty decent.
it really doesn't matter. When
no, but
you're,
that
in
just
a 30-point game,
it shows they
Maryland's
shot
gonna
50% from 3, and it doesn't even matter.
Maryland's going to let them shoot threes
Yeah.
in a blowout game. So I think that number is a little bit
1 for 6
silver
in the
lining,
first half,
right?
7 for 10 in the second.
Exactly. 7 for 10 in the second half when Maryland no longer needed to even guard the 3 because it wasn't a threat. And how many of those came from Elijah Moore just taking random shots? Like Elijah Moore is obviously a fantastic player, and he has the confidence that a freshman that I love to see on a game in, game out basis. I love everything that I see from him, really. But I mean, he led the team in scoring today, but so many of those points were just garbage time, meaningless points. I mean, down the stretch.
Moore only had 2 in the first half, so basically every single one of his points was garbage. I mean, almost every single point in this game was a garbage time point, let's be honest, because after that first time out, it was basically over. After that first media
Syracuse
timeout,
had
7 minutes, it was done.
17 points in the first half.
Yeah.
When Maryland was playing them hard.
And again, Maryland had 18 points off of turnovers in the first half. Like, it wasn't even close. You said the lack of direction with this team. You
That's
brought
the
that
thing
up.
that worries me the most.
So that goes to 2 people. Number 1, the coach, which we've already talked about a little bit. Number 2, it's the point guard. That's all on Jaquan Carlos. He's supposed to be the guy leading the offense, getting the ball to where it needs to be. He played 40 minutes tonight, didn't go off the floor. 2 points, 4 assists, 4 turnovers, and he just didn't look comfortable. He couldn't get by anyone. He couldn't even pass the ball without telegraphing it. I mean, when he wasn't dominating earlier in the season, this should have just been obvious that this was going to happen. Like, I know he played pretty well against Georgetown, and he's picked things up the last couple games. This should have been obvious that the second that he plays a better team, it all falls apart. Because he just didn't look like he should have been out there. I mean, Carlos is your point guard, and he can't do anything. He has as many turnovers as he does assists.
Yeah, quite simply. And I don't want to be harsh to Jaquan because, I mean, he's a fantastic guy. He's been great with us all season long, but in my eyes, with what I've seen through now the first 11 games of the season, he's just not cut out to play at the Power 4 level.
No.
He's not a talented enough player.
This entire team isn't at this point because, okay, Carlos can't.
Well, can you say that, though? Because how can you say that they're not talented enough when we have seen what Chris Bell can do?
Well,
like,
because they are talented enough, but they don't have the coach who knows how to use that talent.
That's exactly what I come back to.
It's that simple.
So it's not about the talent. It's about the coaching.
It is. It all comes down to the coaching.
Do you think that Jaquan Carlos could be good enough with the right coach? Do you think Eddie Lampkin could be more effective with the right coach? So that's the issue. The issue isn't really the issue does not lie within the realm of the fact that there's not enough talent on the team. I mean, Donnie Freeman obviously is good. I mean, he shot 60% today, 1 for 3 from 3. He actually didn't have a terrible game. 7 boards,
a lot of
4 assists.
Garbage time in the end, though.
Sure,
but
yeah.
Again, you just said it. Does this team has the talent?
They
Why
don't have
isn't
the
it working?
tools to execute is what it seems like. They're not given the preparation and the tools to execute. And I just wonder, like, at what point like, when does Adrian Autry go up to the podium after these games and not have an answer? Because he's kind of doesn't have an answer now, but when is it like unacceptable? And
I think it's been unacceptable. At home, what do you all think? Call in 315-443-2011 because this is bad, and I think we have to dive into the coaching here. I mean, we've both agreed now that this team has the raw talent. It has Chris Bell, who we've seen can shoot.
No doubt.
Donnie Freeman, Elijah Moore, 2 top guys. You have someone like Jaquan Carlos, who was a star at Hofstra before, just like Jacoby Gillespie was at Belmont, Maryland's point guard, who we saw had a double-double today. And yet when they all come here, they're not good enough. And that talent is just not being used. And I don't want to go as far as calling for Coach Autry's job right now because, he's a legend at this school, and he deserves to have the benefit of the doubt because he's a legend here, and you got to give him time. And we've seen what he's done with the recruiting rankings, and there's Sadiq White and Kyan Anthony and this top-rated recruiting class come in, but it's clear what the fan base says. Barstool Cuse put out a poll earlier. Is it time for Red to go? 829 votes, 77% say yes, it's time for him to go. Because at what point, we're saying there's talent on the team now. If the argument is you can't get rid of him because there's talent on the team next year and you have this great recruiting class come in, what makes you think that they'd actually be able to play well once they get here?
Sure.
Because there's talent on this team and it doesn't matter.
Exactly. And Adrian Autry said today after the game, we're just getting this quote now, he was asked if this is the worst loss that he's had as a head coach, and he said, yes, this is the worst. And
is it?
I just wonder, though, when's the next worst going to be? Because I feel like the last worst was 2 weeks ago against Tennessee. That was the worst loss. Tennessee's a better team than Maryland is. But
Wake Forest last year when you lose by almost 30.
Exactly, and you apologize. You play Wake Forest in 2 games. Is that going to be the worst loss if you lose that game?
I don't think this is the worst loss of the season. I think it gets worse from here. Because
what's going to happen when you play Duke?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a team, we're talking about Tennessee when this team is fresh, coming off a lot of rest, some time, they're getting a solid amount of time in between games because that's the nature of the beginning of the season. They didn't play for 6 days, and they didn't play 4 days after that, after they played Tennessee. So they had some time to prepare for that game. When you play Duke,
coming off of a West Coast trip,
you're looking at a West Coast trip on the weekend, coming back home with a game against Boston College just a few days later. And your guys are going to be beat up and tired.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen then when you play a top 5 team in February when the wear and tear of the season has gotten to you, not a time at the beginning of the season when you have a week to prepare essentially for a Tennessee team and you have fresh bodies on the court? And I mean, what is going to happen?
Only bad things. I mean, we've seen this team coming into this game. We saw this team with a week of preparation look just awful out of the jump. So you think, okay, you know what? Maybe Autry gets in his own head when he has a lot of time off. Let's think what happens when there's short time in between games and he's got to quickly adjust. Let's just think, how does he adjust at halftime? The start of the second half of this game was absolutely atrocious. Maryland goes on a 10-2 run, multiple wide-open, easy layups. It looks like they were in the middle of layup lines, but the game had already started. Those halftime adjustments don't exist. There's no adjustments at a timeouts. What makes you think that anything can get better
from the Lemoyne game on November 4th that opened the season? It's pretty much been the exact same product every time. There hasn't been changes. Yeah. I mean, maybe there have been in theory, but they haven't shown up on the court. Because if you play, I guarantee you could play Lemoyne tomorrow and probably have a similar result. Beat them by a couple points, simply based on the fact that you have bigger, more physical guys who are just simply more athletically gifted than the guys that Lemoyne is going to have. You could probably beat Colgate by 2. Colgate's not a very good team this year. They've been blown out by a lot of different squads. You could probably take Youngstown State to double overtime. Check in on Youngstown State's record. They're 7-5, and they've had some pretty bad losses. I mean, I don't know that you could play Texas to 4 again. All of a sudden, playing Texas to 4 points in that loss, that's probably the best game of the season in terms of the product you put on the floor.
In totality, if we think about it this way, all the issues that you're kind of bringing up here, all the issues from that Lemoyne game, they didn't shoot the ball well. There wasn't that much fight.
I mean, the only reason they beat Lemoyne was because Jair Davis had 22 points.
Jaquan Carlos wasn't good in that game.
Nope.
Chris Bell wasn't great in that. Every single one of those issues that you had in the first game of the season when this team barely beat Lemoyne, there's not a single thing that's been solved.
No.
There's not a single issue this season that Adrian Autry has fixed. There's not one thing.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, this thing has gotten better, but this thing has gotten worse. Nothing has gotten better, and things have only gotten worse.
Yeah, I really like.
I guess they shot 100% from the free throw line today, right? 2 for 2. They didn't even go to the line. Like, there's not a single thing from this game that I can take away positively.
Yeah, there really isn't. And I mean, clearly the coaching staff is in agreement with us. We have another quote from Adrian Autry after the game today. This game in particular, it would have been great to have another guard. They tired Jaquan Carlos out. Well, I do have to ask this question, because was it ever the intention for J.J. Starling to be the primary ball handler? I thought that the idea of getting Jaquan with the team was to give J.J. a lot more off-ball looks.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole point.
I mean, there's no one injured outside of Jaquan Carlos, so has this just been like a realization mid-season that, oh, wow, no one else can actually handle the ball consistently down the floor without turning it over? I mean, Jaquan Carlos still turns it over 4 times today.
Yeah.
So really there's just no viable options. And I don't mean to be so negative, but
you have to be.
What else can you say? I mean, if this is the only... I mean, Jaquan Carlos played awful today. Awful. 1 for 5 from the floor. The one shot that he hit he was basically wide open. And he turned the ball over 4 times. You already mentioned that's as many assists as he had as well. So he really just didn't do anything that great. And he is the only guy sufficient to handle the ball. I mean,
before the season, I don't understand how Autry could come into this year with the understanding that he only had Starling and Carlos as his 2 ball handlers. Because, don't you have to go into the season with at least somewhat of a backup plan of hey, you know what? Maybe Carlos gets into foul trouble. Or what if J.J. Starling picks up 2 fouls in this game? J.J. Starling is completely healthy. He picks up 2 fouls in the first 5 minutes. He's got to go to the bench. Then the same thing happens.
Right.
What if that happened?
Let's talk about J.J. Starling, because
he doesn't change anything in this game.
You don't think so? I don't even know.
Well, we just talked about what's gotten better from the start of the season to now. J.J. Starling was playing in those games, and they still looked horrible.
Yeah, but they came out with some wins. I mean, they don't win Youngstown State without
Okay, but they're also
Starling.
not playing Youngstown State today.
Sure.
Today's team could maybe beat Youngstown State, because there's such a massive talent gap there.
But I think J.J. Starling, I mean, he definitely makes it a closer game. You can't just completely...
I don't think he does make it that much of a closer game.
How is that possible?
Because even when they had him, they barely beat Lemoyne, they barely beat Colgate.
I mean,
they
at some point you just got to accept
State.
the fact that J.J. Starling was, before going down, he was a incredibly nationally recognized effective 2-point shooter.
He was this team's best player, but I don't think it even matters.
At some point in this game, I assume that the coaching staff just has to say, forget everything. We're just going to give the ball to JJ and just let him go ISO and see if he can score. And I think that he probably does a little bit. I'm not saying that they win. I don't think that they would beat Maryland today with JJ Starling, but you'd have to think it would be a bit of a closer game. And you look at the 2 teams that they played that were actually Power 4 teams while he was healthy, Texas and Texas Tech. Those are their closest 2 losses.
But what about the other games that they played when he was healthy and they looked horrible? And they barely beat a bunch of bad.
Sure.
Yes, they still came out with...
It's impossible to debate hypotheticals like that, though, because you don't know what would have happened. My point is, you have to at least recognize that Starling makes this game a little bit closer if he plays today.
Okay, so they lose by 20 instead of 27.
Yeah, sure, maybe. Maybe they lose by 15. I still don't think they win, because clearly, all these issues, I'm not trying to dismiss these issues. I'm just trying to say that there's other issues in addition to that. But this team needs him back desperately.
Yeah.
If they're not going to be... I don't to say this about Syracuse basketball is crazy, because the brand of Syracuse basketball that I grew up knowing is so far distant from where this team is at now. But we could be talking about Syracuse at the bottom of the ACC.
I don't think this team makes the ACC tournament at this rate. Look, I know that the
some serious
I know that the conference is bad, but still, if you can't even look competitive.
Despite the fact.
You don't even look like you belong on the same court as Maryland right now. Maryland's not even...
Disagree.
It's a good Maryland team. Let's not discredit Maryland here. I think Maryland is a team this year that... I think Maryland's a Sweet 16 team this year at minimum. I think that it's a good enough team. I trust Kevin Willard. I've talked about how much I've watched this Maryland team because so much of my family went to Maryland. I grew up with Maryland season tickets before I came up here to Syracuse, so I know how excited the Maryland fans are about that team. But still, if you look at it from the Syracuse perspective, they were never even in it. From the jump, it was over. There was never even a glimmer of hope in this game.
I mean, Maryland just came out with so much more energy. That's something you can't, coach or... Well, it is actually something you can coach. That's not something that you can, it's something you can control, right? It's not like a talent difference. You can, if you come out and play with hustle, and
it's the
play
number one
aggressive
controllable.
Defense, yeah, I mean, what else is the coaching staff supposed to be doing at this point? Just get your team to come out with some fire. How can you not be a little bit upset and fired up with the way that your season's gone? You just lost to your biggest rival. And you got players in the locker room saying that they don't even know what the rivalry is, or it's just another game. Well, that's clearly where the disconnect is, because the Syracuse basketball team that actually would have gone on and done something today knew about the rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
And this team doesn't. And they just go out and lay another pathetic performance on the line.
Yeah.
And it's just we're just going to pack up and come back next week and probably beat Bucknell by 6 points and then get blown out by Wake Forest.
I mean, here's where I think a lot of this comes from. First off, we want to say again at home, if you want to give your thoughts on this atrocious 87-60 loss for Syracuse against Maryland, you can call in at 315-443-2011. We're here until 4 p.m. to hear all of your thoughts on this rough game, and we've got a caller right now, Joel, who wants to just talk about this lackluster performance. What you got for us?
Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking my call. Yes, watching that was painful today. I think you guys have touched upon it. Just the performance right from the get-go, just kind of a lack of efficiency offensively, defensively. One-on-one, they still don't seem to understand what they're doing. Turnovers are just killing them, and they can't make a shot. It is frustrating to watch.
Every part of the basketball game.
Yeah, exactly. It just sounds like you're listing off the recipe to lose. And this is the one thing, Adam and I have been very much in agreement for most of this show, Joel, but I do want to ask you about the difference you thought maybe J.J. Starling would make in this game, because that is the one thing where we differ. Adam doesn't seem to think he would have made it that much closer. I think he could have made it a single-digit game, potentially, at his best.
A single-digit game, I don't know. He certainly would have kept it interesting, at least in the first half. One player is not making it. There are too many holes on this team. I tell you one thing. If you look at Chris Bell's performances from 2 years ago and then last year and this year, I think a couple of years ago he was, mid-30s from three. Last year he was about 40%, something like that.
He was
I think
42.
he's in the low 20s at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And if he doesn't make his first one, you're going to see him start to talk to himself, and then he's not going to shoot again. And
That's already happening. That's already happening, Joel.
Offensively and defensively.
I mean, the confidence with Chris Bell is not in a good place. I mean, that's been well documented at this point.
The mindset is everything right now for this team. Joel, thank you so much for the call. We really, really appreciate it. And when we talk about this mindset, there was something that came out earlier this week that I think we can connect this to. So this is a little bit off topic, but I think it connects back. Jordan Smith is the number 6 overall recruit in the class of 2026. He came up to visit Syracuse last week. Jamie Shaw at On3 wrote one of his articles where he talks to the recruits, and they say what they think about their visit. What he said about Syracuse was, when I went to their practice, it was like a team takeover practice, so I was like, okay. Team Takeover is the number 1 AAU program in Washington, D.C. It's where Donnie Freeman played. It's where a number of other guys on this team played. And the fact that this guy, who is the number 6 recruit in the country, Jordan Smith, is saying that their practices look like an AAU practice tells you everything that you need to know. Practice translates to games. If they aren't in the right mindset during practice, what makes you think that now they can?
Well, you need someone to pull you out of a bad mindset, right, and into a good one. And that's where the coaching comes in. If it's going great, then team-run practices are probably great because the team is positive, they're optimistic, they're playing with heart and hustle. Like, there is a good energy around the team. Clearly, team-run practices should not be happening right now because the product on the court is just atrocious.
It is. We've got David on the line, David from Syracuse, who wants to talk about what J.J. Starling maybe could have done. David, do you think if J.J. plays, this is a closer game?
Well, I want to tell you this for one thing. If J.J. Starling was playing, okay, we would have beaten Notre Dame. We would have beaten Georgetown. There's no question about it. We had that lead. We blew it. We would have beaten Georgetown. I don't know if we would have won this game. I think it would have been a lot closer game, but we definitely would have beaten Georgetown, and we would have beaten Notre Dame. Those are absolutely 100% no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We'd have won those 2 games with J.J. Starling. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Well, here's the thing, though. When you talk about Notre Dame and Georgetown, those aren't, powers right now. Those are bad teams. Do you think that J.J. Starling could lead Syracuse to keeping it close with a good team like Maryland, or all he would do is just let them beat bad teams like Georgetown and Notre Dame?
He would keep it close. Absolutely. He's our best player. I mean, I'll tell you this. I think that our season, once he comes back, will turn around. I'm trying to be optimistic.
David, I'm with you. I really am. I think that...
I'll tell you this. I'm a Dallas fan, and I'm still optimistic that we're going to win out, and Commanders are going to lose out, and we're going to make the playoffs.
As a diehard Commanders fan, I think you're wrong.
I'm trying to be optimistic as a Syracuse fan.
As a Commanders fan, I think that you're very wrong there. But you know what? I appreciate the optimism because, you know what? We can always try and be a little bit optimistic. David, we really appreciate it. We've got another one on the line, Rich from Clay. Wants to take a bit of a deeper look into this program. Rich, we've talked a lot about the coaching here. Is that where you want to go with this? Oh, I think we lost Rich there. Sorry about that.
It's all right. We got a lot of people coming in. I wanted to talk about this game, and understandably so. I think the main takeaway that we can have here is it's just not good right now. Maybe J.J. Starling makes it a lot better. Maybe he makes it a little better. It's certainly an issue, but injuries, Adam, the one thing we really haven't talked about, injuries are part of the season. They're something that every single team deals with.
Yeah.
And that is part of coaching, being able to deal with these injuries. And clearly, right now, it is just not working. Whatever the situation is, it's not working.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you can't say to have you can't have like a massive backup plan for if your star player goes down. But you got to have at least something because what Adrian Autry has told us is that with J.J. Starling hurt, Jaquan Carlos is the only player left on the team that can handle the ball. Like, that's what I just straight up don't understand. If Starling is healthy, if this team is fully healthy, you have 2 ball handlers, you can't go into a basketball season in the ACC with just 2 ball handlers.
Especially
again,
2 guys who are going to be in your starting line.
And again, what if Starling gets into foul trouble? Then this team is in the exact same spot that it's in right now.
Yeah.
It's just absurd. I mean, it's just awful. There's everything wrong right now with this team, and we're going to take a quick break here on the double overtime. We'll step aside, but don't go anywhere because we've got a lot more to talk about from this 87-60 loss for the Orange to Maryland. We've got our reporter, Jonah Weintraub, who will join us later on in the show. He was at the Barclays Center, so you're going to want to be there for that, but we'll be back in just a minute talking Syracuse and Maryland here on the double overtime. Don't go anywhere.
Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music as we welcome back Common Threads here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you're seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads Sundays from 2 to 5 exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
the Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at WAER.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Give a gift to WAER and yourself when you let us take your unwanted vehicle off your hands. Not only will your donation help support the on-air programs our community relies on every day, but it may even qualify for a tax deduction. Go to WAER.org to learn more.
Are you interested in hearing music from Tuareg nomads, tuba throat singers, Congolese dance bands, and Jamaican dub? Well, you can here on WAER on Top of the World, Sundays from 8 to 11 p.m. with Mark Bostic and Connie Whaler.
It's stolen away. Gillespie 1-on-2 hits Geronimo, who soars in for the dunk. Oh, he tickled the clouds. 1 second to go. Cuff jacks it up, and it's no good. Maryland's fans in the red and yellow stand and clap and cheer. What a pathetic first half from Syracuse.
The second half wasn't much better. Syracuse loses 87-60 to Maryland. Welcome back inside our Ostrom Avenue studios for the double overtime. Luke Burgess alongside Adam Gotkin. Syracuse, a big-time loss in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center. We're on the air until 4 p.m. You can talk to us, 315-443-2011. Text us as well, 315-556-3929. You can also find us on X at WAER Sports Talk or on YouTube. We actually have someone who's already called in, and we love the participation that we're getting. We've got Rich. Rich from Clay, you want to talk about a deeper look into the program. What do you got, man?
Good afternoon, guys.
How's it going?
So, wow.
Yeah.
Just wow. And I've been a fan going all the way back to Manly, and seen the intensity there, the intensity through the years, and the highs and the lows. And I keep coming back. You know, as people, we want to be optimistic, you know, eternally optimistic, but for us to not be ranked since 2018, I think, is a fact. I mean, let that sink in for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I always struggle. How can we not get the talent consistently like the Tar Heels or Kansas or Duke, given our history, right?
Yeah.
And so Boeheim or no Boeheim, you know, whatever's going on there this is not all of a sudden. We've had 6 years of this, and so you could probably say, you know, the last 8 years, this has been leading up to it. So there's something going on up there that
certainly,
that has to change. And Red's a great guy.
Well, Rich,
means well, all the above, but something's wrong up there.
I think the thing is, there's a changing landscape of college basketball, right? And it's not even necessarily, I mean, there's a lot to unpack about what you just said, but it's not even necessarily Syracuse not having the talent, because look at the recruiting class. The recruiting class for next season is ranked 10th in the country at the moment. And I mean, that's a good number. That's right up there with those teams that you just mentioned, but clearly the biggest issue, and I mentioned this before we went to break, but the biggest issue right now is that there's just not the coaching to execute on the floor. And you can say what you want about Boeheim leaving and his final few years weren't as competitive as fans were used to, but you've seen other teams execute coaching transitions. You look at what
Maryland.
Look at what Duke has done. If you want to talk about the big time programs, the blue blood programs that are, you know, made up college basketball, when you're talking about the Manly Fieldhouse era, well, like, they've transitioned with Shire pretty seamlessly.
And how did we settle? All due respect to the young man, but you look back at our point guards, and historically, that's where we've built our program.
Yeah.
And on down. And we've had Flynn go all the way back as far as you want to go, Sherman Douglas, et cetera, et cetera. Could we not get better than Carlos? I'm struggling to understand why we settled there.
Here's the thing. I don't think Carlos is that bad of a basketball player. If you saw what he did at Hofstra, his stats at Hofstra, what he was able to do at Hofstra, are pretty similar to Jacoby Gillespie, Maryland's point guard, and what he did at Belmont. Similar level of play. They both transfer in. One is good at Maryland and the other's bad at Syracuse.
Right.
There's something behind that.
Similar level of play. Rich, I really appreciate your call. We appreciate you
it.
talking with us this afternoon after what was obviously a tough listen for a lot of Syracuse fans. And, you know, Adam, we're obviously younger. We don't get the culture and the history. Well, we try to, but Rich has lived it. And he talks about building this program through point guards. I just think you're absolutely right. I don't know that right now this system that's in place is putting point guards in the position to even have success, even if they do play well. And I mean,
it's not putting anyone in a position for success right now.
Let's talk a little bit about the defense, though, today, because that is something that Jaquan Carlos has talked about to the media a lot. He's talked about how he hasn't been good enough defensively, how he needs to be more aggressive, how he's the head of the snake. That was something that he said right at the beginning of the season when his defensive struggles started to get pointed out, maybe Game 5, Game 6 of the season. I don't know, like, Adrian Autry goes to the 2-3 zone at the end of that game. It almost just seems like a desperation grab to try and make something more respectable. It's not like the 2-3 zone is actually like a solution. There just is no solution right now. It's just the defense is team. They're bad. They're just a bad defensive team. They don't seem to be well coached.
They're going under on screens against 3-point shooters. Selton Miguel has 6 threes today. Am I right on that? He made 6 threes, 6 for 9, and they're going under on screens against him and giving him room to shoot threes. That is basic basketball. If you have a 3-point shooter, don't give him the room to shoot.
And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about these team-run practices, right? If you're having team-run practices and you can't do these basic things on the defensive end of the ball and you're just getting burned game in and game out. Today, Maryland just absolutely dominated you. And they didn't just dominate you physically. They didn't just dominate you tactically. They dominated you mentally because Syracuse was just out-mentaled from game 1, or from minute 1, I should say, of this game. And it's clear when a team just doesn't have an idea of what they need to execute with, that's where you see the energy level drop. And, I think I've danced around it a little bit too much, but this season and the collapse post J.J. Starling injury is entirely on this coaching staff.
It is.
And they just don't seem to have the right idea of how to fix this team. And there are ways you could have lost this game and still made it look good. But the defense in the first half was pathetic. There's just no effort. I know that we've talked about effort already, but, it just doesn't – that's the biggest thing. There's no effort on the offensive side of the ball. There's no effort on the defensive side of the ball. The points that you are getting are either garbage time points or they're based off pure skill. Elijah Moore gets 16 points. He's a great shooter. He's hit great shots all year. He played tough against Tennessee. Obviously, he's going to be able to score. Donnie Freeman is a physical, athletic freak. He only played 26 minutes tonight. And I get that you've got to get guys in and out. You're trying to mix up lineups. There was a point of this game where Kyle Cuff was leading the team in scoring. 0 points from Jair Davis. He started. 2 points from Chris Bell. Where is it going to end? The thing is, Adrian Autry has no second option, which we've talked about with the point guard position, but the same thing applies for Chris Bell. He's not good defensively. He doesn't hustle. He just doesn't. That's not a new thing. Jim Boeheim was taking him out of games his freshman year because of that. And that hasn't changed. It's something probably mentally. I'm sure he wants to play harder defensively, but it's not his characteristic. That's not how he plays the game of basketball.
It's just not good.
The rest of the defense, Jaquan Carlos, not physical enough for a point guard. Not quick enough to keep up with guards who are blowing by him on a consistent basis.
Turns the ball over all the time. Enough.
And when Syracuse does get the ball, he's not responsible with it in transition. So when they actually do anything on defense, they kill that momentum quickly. And the defense has to go on its back heel. That makes the defense look a whole lot worse. Your thoughts on the defense, we'd love to hear them. 315-443-2011. Text us 315-556-3929.
Can we compare these two programs a little bit for a second? Because,
sure, yeah. Why not? They were in similar situations not too long ago.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Last year, these teams were in very similar spots.
Yeah.
Syracuse both missed the tournament. Syracuse, we've said it, they won 20 games, but it didn't necessarily feel like they ever really had a chance to make the tournament. Maryland was in a similar spot. They were with a second-year coach then, 16 and 17, but they were able to turn it around because their coach was good enough to truly recognize talent and build them back to what they should be. Maryland and Syracuse are about as identical of college basketball programs as you can get.
Yeah,
they had,
at this point.
They had legendary coaches from the early 70s to the 2010s. Maryland, it was Lefty Driesell. He was out for a couple of years. They got some sanctions. He's, of course, one of the best coaches in the history of the sport.
Sure.
Created Midnight Madness. And then they go into Gary Williams, one of the best coaches in the ACC's history, won the national championship the year before Syracuse wins it. And then Maryland, as a program, started to fall off a little bit. And they went to Turgeon, had a couple decent years with him where they were in the top 5. And then they realized that Maryland fired Mark Turgeon 2 years after he was a top 5 team in the country. They realized it wasn't good enough because they weren't getting above that hump. That's why they got rid of him. Syracuse fans at some point after this have to realize that this isn't good enough. And they have to look outside and go to something new like Kevin Willard, a coach who was in the Big East, who knew this area, who knew how to recruit the Northeast, because that was the issue with Turgeon at Maryland. He was a guy who was from Wichita State, who was not a Northeasterner. He is from Kansas originally. Like, that was the issue with Maryland with him. So they went to Willard, a guy who was familiar with the Northeast, who was out of the program, and look what they've done. They've won now. Syracuse stayed in-house, and when things weren't going well with Boeheim, they decided, you know what? Let's keep doing the same thing and go to someone who's coached under him basically his entire career, and it hasn't worked. Like, we see what Maryland can do with a very similar brand of Syracuse and a good coach. They have such similar recruiting rankings.
Yeah.
But there's one massive difference, and it's coaching.
I want to say, Adam, I don't know that John Wildhack is going to be as timid as maybe we're assuming that he might be. I think that unless this team goes on some type of run and Adrian Autry is able to figure it out, I really think he could be coaching for his job at the end of this season. I do. Why not? Look at when things went bad and there were standards set, and with the football program, there was a standard set, and when that standard wasn't met, they went to something else. But I don't see why that couldn't happen this year with Adrian Autry. I understand he's an in-house guy, but
it's his second year. He's a program legend.
But the thing
Babers
is,
had 8 seasons?
Yeah, but this is a team that is on a different level than the football team. The level of expectation of greatness is different. Yeah, and so I think the leash has to be shorter as a result of that. So I don't think there's any reason why that couldn't be a serious conversation at the end of the year. Not between us on the double overtime, but in the athletic department.
Well, it's like what we said earlier of the fact of the only thing really that keeps you from getting rid of him is that you have a great recruiting class coming in next year. But what has this team shown you to think that a great recruiting class would mean that they're actually a good basketball team? Because great recruiting classes don't always lead to good teams.
Well, clearly.
We see it right now.
Yeah,
we see it with this team.
Look at Donnie Freeman, who has been pretty good, puts up pretty good numbers on a consistent basis.
Doesn't matter.
The results of the team, nowhere close to what they should be for what he's doing.
Yeah. There's just so many things that just we can go back to the effort.
I don't even.
He's the one guy who puts in effort.
This is so off topic, but I would be scared of what Donnie Freeman could do in a good system.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, because he has shown flashes. If you look at the Cornell game, if you look at Georgetown for periods, like what he can do. If you look at Notre Dame in that second half, I mean, Donnie Freeman, like with a program that's playing to its potential, he could be really something special. And I still think that he can tap into that this year because he's so talented, but he's not getting any help. I mean, Adam,
he's one of the only guys that puts in effort.
He's the only player on the floor that started today that shot better than 50%.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is just like, where is your big man? Where is Eddie Lampkin? He shoots 40% today. He doesn't get to the line one time. Like, he played 33 minutes. Why is he not getting the ball more? He's in single-digit points, and he took as many shots as anyone who started, only took fewer shots than Elijah Moore. And Elijah Moore was just basically shooting up everything that went into his hands in the last 10 minutes of that game.
So you just kind of brought up the last 10 minutes. I think the scoring in the second half, with it being Freeman and Moore, is interesting because Bell, Carlos, Davis all went scoreless in the second half. Lampkin had 3, Lucas Taylor had 3. Other than that, the only guys who scored, really, who had more than 3 points, were Freeman with 15, Cuff with 8, and Moore with 14. I said this after the UAlbany dot that I thought Cuff should start. I think that the fact that those guys all scored in the second half shows that one thing, that those are the 3 guys that actually play with effort.
Yeah.
Like, those are the only 3 guys on this team who haven't been fully sucked into whatever this vortex is of just straight-up negativity and bad body language and everything that's gone wrong, the Chris Bell syndrome, you could call it, of where everything just falls apart. Like, those are the only 3 guys that haven't been sucked into it yet. 2 freshmen and Kyle Cuff, who is just this energizer.
Well, yeah, two guys who are freshmen are trying to prove themselves, and I mean, with the way college basketball is right now, could easily not be here next year. And then Kyle Cuff, who is fighting for minutes.
That's the other
thing.
So
Kyle Cuff's always going to give energy because he actually wants to be on the floor.
Why would Donnie Freeman or Elijah Moore? We don't know if they're going to the draft at this point. Freeman has slipped down out of mock drafts. Most people don't have him in the
he's
first
pretty much
round.
undrafted now.
why would they stay here?
Yeah, I don't really have an answer for you. Not unless you see something. You have to see something. And the thing is, these guys know the environment of the room, obviously, much more than we do, but there isn't much reason. What do you think about these guys staying long-term? And I'll throw in as well the recruiting class for next year. That's a big talking point of why Adrian Autry is probably going to stick around for another year. He's bringing in Sadiq White, Luke Fennell, of course, Kyan Anthony. Are those guys the reason that you keep him around? 315-443-2011 or shoot us a text, 315-556-3929. You can also interact with us on X and YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. Maryland demolishes Syracuse 87-60. I'm alongside Adam Gotkin here for the next 50 minutes. We're breaking this one down. We still got our reporter from Brooklyn, Jonah Weintraub, who's going to come on later and tell us a little bit more about what Coach Autry had to say. But one of the last things I want to talk about.
Before you move on,
Sure.
Can we go back to what you just said do you keep Autry because of the guys coming in next year?
Yeah.
If you think about the guys coming in next year, Anthony is, of course, like the biggest one. Or not the biggest name. Kyan Anthony's the biggest name.
Sure.
You mentioned Luke Fennell, the guard from Australia, who I actually think could be really good. When he was asked about why Syracuse, he brought up Carmelo and the brand and all of that.
The brand, right? The brand that's slowly deteriorating.
But here's the thing. I don't think that these guys are coming to Syracuse because of Autry or the coaching at all. I think the only reason that any of these guys are coming to Syracuse is because of the brand. Adrian Autry is not the brand. It's not like Jim Boeheim where you worry about if you get rid of him, it's not going to be this. Like, you're already past that.
Yeah.
Autry's not. No one's coming to Syracuse for Autry, I wouldn't think. From what Kyan Anthony has said, from what Luke Fennell has said, they want to come to Syracuse for the brand to play in the biggest on-campus arena in the country.
Yep.
And
I'm with you.
I don't understand how you can just be okay with this. And
I don't think anyone's okay with it. No, I will say
the
that.
athletic department has to make that there has to be
so
change.
Okay. So what would you do
if it's not Autry going? Which I don't want to jump to.
What's the standard?
What is the standard for Syracuse basketball?
At what point is it not good enough? And
it's not good enough when you don't make the tournament 2 years in a row in the first place. I mean that should be the minimum. Is at least every other year you make the tournament.
Okay, but post coaching change.
Post coaching change.
So you're saying if you don't make the tournament this year, then Autry should go.
I mean, I think that it's a little bit harder when you have a second-year coach replacing a guy who was here for almost 50 years.
Sure.
And when that coach is also a program legend and one of the best players that you've ever seen here, you don't want to burn that bridge so fast. But you have to at least think about it. You have to ensure that there are real changes with the assistant coaches because there's got to be something that changes. Whatever happens, no matter how this season ends, if they go on a run, if Starling comes back and things are better, just based on the fact that the Georgetown game was the lowest attending Georgetown game in the Dome regular season ever, not during COVID. The fact that this team has multiple times now been on ESPN and not even look competitive, doesn't matter what they do the rest of the season. That tells you there has to be some sort of change.
We're fishing for answers, clearly, and you know, right now all the lakes in Syracuse are frozen. Hopefully our guy Jim from Syracuse can give us some type of answer. Jim, you want to talk about defensive effort? That was what we wanted to talk about too, but it's hard not to get dragged onto other things. What do you got?
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I just was telling your screener there, I've been watching Syracuse basketball. I actually, saw Bing and Boeheim play games in the same backcourt.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is this. Number one, there's no way they're going to get rid of Autry right away. They just, their hands are tied. They can't do that. It's not going to happen. They just recruited Carmelo Anthony's son. It's not going to happen. But the thing that really, and I really want Autry to succeed. I'm not a coach basher at all. But when I see a team that plays defense with so little effort, there's no effort at all.
Yeah.
I mean, defense is all about wanting it. It's just about effort, and they have no interest at all in playing any defense, which leads me to really see that they don't seem to be scared of their coach. You have to have a little bit of trepidation and fear of your coach. Now, when Boeheim took over in =76, nobody knew what kind of a coach he was going to be. Immediately, you could see that Boeheim's presence, his will, his desire he wanted to win so bad that it reflected on the team. He could will these teams to win. I don't know how he did it, but he did. I remember they played Louisville in like his second game as a coach in 1976, and Louisville was like first in the country, and they played them in Louisville and they beat them. It was so obvious. It's really a bad sign that this team has no interest whatsoever in playing defense.
I mean, Jim, that's something
that they all want to jack up 3-pointers and whatever, but anybody can score 15 or 20 points. It means nothing. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but it's really a bad sign.
Jim, I do want to hear. I do want to hear
from
you.
I mean, it's a really bad sign
because we've been trying to figure it out, and like. Is that the answer? They're not scared enough of their coach? Like, what has to happen to give that effort on defense? Because to me and Adam, it just seems like
I mean, when you're not scared of your coach, you play like they played today. The way, you just go out and you kind of lope around and you just, I mean, that is how you play, okay? That looks like a game down at the YMCA or whatever. But there has to be, I mean, when you bring a whole bunch of new guys in every year, it really creates a whole new set of problems because there's no real leader out there. I mean, there's nobody that can say, hey, I'm the guy, I'm the face of the program, you listen to me. And if you play defense like that, I'm going to tell the coach to get your ass on the bench. I mean, there's so many problems right now, and it's just like metastasized. When you're down like 51-19 or whatever, and you're playing on national TV, and you're playing in Brooklyn in front of a bunch of alums and everything, and you play like that, there's no interest in like diving for a loose ball or whatever. These things are all, these are all signs of a losing program. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I played a lot of sports. I mean, it's like an inner will that you never let you get yourself. You don't get humiliated like that. And that didn't happen for the first 35 or 40 years that Boeheim was here, ever. I mean, it just did not. He would not allow that. You know what I'm saying?
I feel your frustration, Jim. Thank you so much for your call. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
And that is, I think Jim perfectly encapsulates the frustration that a lot of long-term Syracuse fans are having. There's no other way to put it. The effort is not there. I think he made a good point. It's actually something I hadn't really thought about. Coaching now, really, and creating that culture of maybe a little bit of fear is maybe more important now than ever, because you just simply do not have the same consistency that you did 30 years ago, where you have to instill that culture so deep in the program that when new guys come in, they just understand it.
You need your players to respect you. And I don't know if they do, if what he's saying is, if what Autry's saying isn't landing. I mean, if you want to talk about like nationally what people think about Syracuse, scrolling Twitter, I just saw this. Eric Haslam, who runs Haslam Metrics, he's the analytically final guy. Might have seen him on Twitter before. He's got a bunch of followers. He tweeted this out at the end of the first half. I'm surprised Maryland would still be scheduling Division II opponents this far into the season.
Oof. Not good.
Like that's what people think about this team right now.
Respected media member. Hopefully someone who has a little bit better of an understanding of what went down today. Our guy, Jonah Weintraub, who went downstate, traveled to Brooklyn, and saw this one in person today. He's going to join us after a short break. Stick with us on the double overtime. Syracuse demolished on a Saturday afternoon in New York City.
Give a gift to WAER and yourself when you let us take your unwanted vehicle off your hands. Not only will your donation help support the on-air programs our community relies on every day, but it may even qualify for a tax deduction. Go to WAER.org
There is a
to
one-stop
learn more.
listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
The Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at WAER.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Left wing. It's Gillespie, top of the key. Fakes, drives down, behind the back pass. Miguel, left wing three. Oh, yeah! Oh, Maryland's just having fun with it in Barclays. 26-11, 6:20 to play in the first.
Welcome back to the Double Overtime on WAER. Adam Gatkin and Luke Burgess breaking down Syracuse's demoralizing 87-60 loss to Maryland down at the Barclays Center. If you want to give us your thoughts on this game, you can call in at 315-443-2011. You can text us 315-556-3929. We're lucky now to be joined by our reporter, Jonah Weintraub, who was at this game at the Barclays Center down in Brooklyn. Jonah, how you doing?
Well, I'd like to say I'm doing better than the Syracuse basketball team did today,
I
which
think we
is
all are.
okay.
I think it would be hard not to be doing better, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, and that's putting it lightly. I mean, you guys touched on it already. This was ugly.
Yeah, it was really bad. So, Jonah, you were in the press conference. You heard from Coach Autry. Just, I mean, was there any sort of explanation of how it was this bad? I mean, I don't even, I have so many questions here. It's hard to pick one, but, did Adrian Autry have any sense of how it got this bad?
Well, you guys already touched on it. The first thing he said was, quote, "This is the worst loss of his tenure at Syracuse as the head coach." And what's interesting to me about that is the UNC loss comes up last year as one that was really, really bad. I mean, the Tennessee one, you guys talked about that already.
Duke last year,
exactly. I mean, look, I think the fact that this isn't even a conversation is kind of a cause for concern to begin with, right? Like, oh, what is the worst loss of
in about a year and a quarter?
A year and a quarter, exactly. But that's not the quote that stuck out to me the most. There was one quote where, well, I don't have the exact wording, but we'll dive into this, and I'd love to dive into this, because the starting lineup was obviously a bit of a curveball with Jair Davis starting. You have three basically power forward, center combos, whatever, starting against a three-guard lineup, and you're like, okay, what's the point of that? It's not like Maryland is running out like 5 bigs at once. Well, Autry claimed that it was a miscommunication.
Huh?
He claimed that the starting lineup was a miscommunication, and then immediately after, kind of, you could tell that when he was saying it at the podium, he's like, should I say this? Should I not? And he ended up saying it. So as a media member, we appreciate that transparency. As a basketball follower of Syracuse, probably don't want to hear that, because, my goodness, how does that even happen?
Did anyone follow up? What does he mean by a miscommunication? Like, what he told the players the wrong thing?
I think he must have told the officials.
Immediately after he said that, it was like one of those things where, like, next thing is like, oh, the last question, like almost an instant regret.
I would have to think, Jonah, that it was something with communicating the lineups to the officials, because the officials at the scorers table have to put the lineups into a computer system so that they're registered, and then after that you can't change them. And
something like that.
So I assume that they handed the wrong lineup card in, or he wrote something wrong. But if that just doesn't show you with a week to prepare, I mean, why was the lineup card not written like 3 days ago? Like,
this team can't do the little thing. That is inexcusable. You can't get the lineup right. I mean, there's no effort, and you can't even get the darn lineup right.
And that's why Elijah Moore checked in a minute 13
that.
into the game.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you were following along on Twitter, I said, like, oh, the starting lineup experiment with the 3 big guys, well, it lasted a minute and 15 seconds. I was kind of being tongue-in-cheek with it. Little did I know that was an accident. And you know what? It wasn't just an accident. I mean, it was an accident, but it was also a costly accident, because it immediately set the tone for the game, right?
Well, I believe Jair Davis turned the ball over on the first possession.
Well, yeah, they had back-to-back turnovers on their first 2 possessions, and Celton Miguel hit a 3 because he was going to first off, he had the best game of his career today, but it definitely and totally helped that he was able to play against a Syracuse team that had 3 bigs. The mismatch was there. Miguel was starting at that 3 position, and he was able to take advantage of the bigger, whether it's Davis or Freeman going against him. He had that advantage all afternoon long.
Yeah, I mean, Jair Davis, that was right. He turned the ball over on the first possession, and then, like you said, Celton Miguel hit a 3. So I got to ask about the kind of the general vibe asking Adrian Autry questions. Like, what is his body language like right now? Because we've talked so much about how, the coaching in the room, the vibe in the room is maybe reflected on the floor. What did you kind of see, I guess, reflected today? Like, what was his body language like coming out, speaking to the media, and dealing with this loss? Like, is it embarrassment? Is it... I don't know. I don't know what to think about how he's going to react to a game like this.
there was like a level of embarrassment. He said that he's embarrassed, disappointed, used all that. But I think at this point, it's like it's Groundhog Day every single time he gets up for a press conference after one of these losses. It sounds like a lot of coach speak, a lot of we have things to look at, we have things to improve on. But the one thing that stood out to me in regards to kind of his sentiment about the actual on-court product today is that he said, we've had plenty of bad losses today, or not today, this year. A really bad loss today, but he said today was the first time that his team didn't compete, and he was really disappointed in the fact that it looked like this team had no fight, no 50-50 balls, no boxing out, and, I'm kind of inclined to agree with him in that point because, look, we've mentioned these other losses this year that have been, head scratchers or, maybe where they got down early to Texas, but at least the last time they were here in Brooklyn against Texas and then Texas Tech, at least they showed some semblance of life. I mean, they got punched in the mouth early today and then never got up.
Well, that's what we were saying at the top of the show is that maybe now that Texas Tech loss and that Texas loss, those are the best 2 games you played all season, really, when you consider the opponent.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's never good when a team's best 2 wins are their 2 closest losses, but that's just the case for Syracuse right now. And it was really interesting because Kevin Willard, the head coach for UMD, spoke as well at the press conference beforehand, and his attitude was so much more stoic than Autry, even in the win. Willard was just all business. He was like, after that blowout win against St. Francis, PA, he's like, oh, I didn't like the way our defense looked, so I was really happy with how they played today, but, still lots of room to improve. And I think that, that kind of relentlessness it translated to the encore product as well, because the intensity that Autry was talking about, Willard's team was just more intense. It looked like, I remember there was one point midway through the second half where Derek Queen basically went out to half court to guard a guard for Syracuse and forced a shot clock violation. Mm-hmm. He was like beating his chest. He was all amped up. Like they're up like 30 at this point, and he's still playing harder than any player for Syracuse, and he's a freshman. So it's not like he's been with the program for multiple years. It's just the expectation now that you guys were talking about, and it showed its head today, not just in the scoreboard, but really, I mean, look, a 27-point win probably should have been more, if not for like a little late spurt from Syracuse when it didn't matter.
Jonah, we're talking about effort here. Something that Luke and I talked about a little bit before, just a moment ago, was the fact that Syracuse really probably won its first 3 games of the season because they were so much bigger, more athletic, and just like straight up better basketball players than the bad teams that they played. And I wanna give this question to everyone at home too. You can call in 315-443-2011. Jonah, did you feel like, because it felt like watching this on TV, that yes, Syracuse didn't have the same effort as Maryland, and of course that's a bad thing, but athletically the Orange weren't necessarily at the same level as well, and just like straight up skill-wise, like yes, there was the effort, but Maryland was just all around a more athletic and just a better team.
What's interesting is that I think the 2 best players for Syracuse today were the freshmen, right? Donnie Freeman and Elijah Moore, not just in the box score, but I think that they played with the most intensity, and I think they played with the most urgency. The reason I bring that up is because that's where the talent stood out for Syracuse. Their most talented players, their highest recruits, were the ones that played the best in this game. Maryland, they're loaded with talent all across the board, but I was, obviously listening to this show earlier, and you had the discussion about these mid-major transfers for Syracuse, like Jair Davis and Jaquan Carlos, and can they play at this level? There's no reason to say that they can't when Maryland's doing the same thing. That also comes down to the coaching, right?
Yeah. Gillespie scores 17. He's from Belmont. Miguel scores 24. He's from USF.
Right. Belmont and Hofstra are totally comparable. That's why and I don't know, Jonah, I know you said you were listening a little earlier on the show. I don't know if you heard what Jim was talking about a little bit earlier, and just talking about the fact that this team maybe isn't scared of their coach. That was something that I had not thought about at all, but it's a valid question because I don't really think that Adrian Autry ever comes off as intimidating, and we know that Jim Boeheim did. I mean, there were certainly times where Jim Boeheim, he was rude to reporters if he was unhappy with how the team played at times. So you never see that from Adrian Autry, and I'm not saying that he shouldn't be his own guy. I think the way that he conducts himself with the media, with the fans, and everything is tremendous. Like, he seems like a great guy in terms of character, but, at the moment, do you think that with this group, maybe if he inherits a team that's just simply loaded, it's a different story. But with this group, do you think he has the mentality and the attitude to get this team where it needs to be?
I don't think it's a question of intimidation, right? I think, especially in the current day, is just a different philosophy for how you're treating your players as young men who are college-age students looking to, soak up the knowledge. Where I think that it differs is the fact that it seems like Syracuse has. Well, let me digress, because I think that you look at a Chris Bell in this case when you're talking about this subject, right? Someone who has been kind of testy at times with Autry, but he did the same thing with Boeheim to a degree, right? So you're kind of dealing with every single team is going to have characters and stuff like that. At the end of the day, talent management is important as a head coach. You're the CEO of your unit. But I don't think that can explain why there's a 30-point gap on the floor between you and Maryland a year removed from both teams being in an extremely similar spot in their respective conferences.
Right.
So we when we talked yesterday, Jonah, one of the big things that we kind of focused on was how Maryland was expected to dominate in the post and how Julian Reese and Derek Queen were just this matchup nightmare for Syracuse. They only combined for 22 points between them. Reese had 13 rebounds, Queen had 8. So definitely, they both had good games. They didn't necessarily dominate, though, and that's not why Maryland won this game by almost 30. Is that as concerning to you as it is to me, that Maryland didn't even have to use its bigs to dominate, and yet they still destroyed Syracuse?
The biggest strength of their team, yeah.
I will say, it was early in the game. I was impressed with Donnie Freeman's defense early into this game.
I would agree with you.
He was intense. He looked like he wanted to be out there.
And that's the thing. We're talking about intensity, and it's kind of like an arbitrary word, right? It kind of seems like, okay, what's the big deal with intensity?
Yeah.
It's ultimately, intensity is 80% of defense in the sport of basketball. And so when we're saying intensity, we're kind of boiling it down to intensity on the defensive end and wanting to will yourself to stay in front of your man.
Yes.
And so I think Donnie Freeman took the challenge against Queen and Reese. He was staying vertical. He was using his length. He looked like he matured. But then he picked up that second foul. And when he picked up that second foul, I think with halfway through the first half, my goodness, Maryland went on that run. And they were picking apart the Syracuse defense. You could tell that they saw Eddie Lampkin and they tried to put him in the pick and roll. And every single Maryland player at once was it was barbecue chicken alert from them.
Yeah, I mean, you see how Maryland operates its offense with Queen running the point in pick and rolls. Like Eddie Lampkin can't do anything about that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, everyone knows that Eddie Lampkin is not necessarily the most stalwart defensive player. He had 5 total blocks last year at Colorado, despite being a starting center for a March Madness team. He's not a vertical threat on defense. He's not really a lateral threat on defense, but he is a great rebounder and takes up space. The issue is that you have other guards on the perimeter that are not good at staying in front of their man, so you're putting, it's complementary defense. And I think that's the issue with SU's defense all season long, is that it's 5 players playing defense, but it's never 5 players playing as a team defense. Everyone is so focused on staying in front of their man and doing their thing, which seldom actually happens because there's no communication. And you see that these easy looks open up all night or all afternoon in this case. I mean, look, the 3-point line was where this game was won for Maryland, but I mean, that and the turnovers, which we haven't even touched on yet.
Yeah, all these things come back to the same thing, though, right, Jonah? Because we're talking about communication. We're talking about the fact that they don't play defense as a team. And, I hate to keep harping on it, but it's just coaching. All those things are coaching. So playing as a team, playing as a unit is coaching. I mean, when you switch the defense from man-to-man to 2-3, that's coaching. But you're saying, oh, well, the man-to-man doesn't look coherent at all. The communication.
Well, I mean,
who's supposed to fix that? Call a timeout and make sure the team communicates more.
Let me say something. The zone didn't look competent either.
Well, no, I wasn't saying that it did. I was just saying they played man-to-man for the majority of this game, and it doesn't look good.
They don't communicate. Jay Williams said this talking about the offense, but I wrote this down when I was listening to the ESPN broadcast. This was after the shot clock.
You weren't listening to the AER broadcast?
Unfortunately, no, I was listening to Jay Williams. I do really enjoy listening to him break down the game as much as I enjoy Austin Barrick and Jordan Leonard breaking it down as well. But Jay Williams said this after a shot clock violation on offense. He said, "It all starts with communication. Syracuse doesn't talk on the offensive end." Now, you were there. I haven't really paid attention to it this season. I don't know if you have, but if you think back to it, was there like a big noticeable difference at all of just like either team being more vocal, or you can just tell that Maryland was communicating at another level? Like, could you tell any of that in the moment watching it?
I'll be honest. I was kind of far away from the court, and I was in courtside, and it was loud in here, and it was loud a lot because there were majority Maryland fans here, and I think that speaks to the direction these programs are going.
Yeah,
right?
That's interesting.
That doesn't fully shock me.
No, but think about
and Maryland has a big alumni,
huge
base.
alumni base in New York City.
Don't get me wrong, but the fact that there were more Maryland fans in downstate New York, in Brooklyn for this game, shows me that there were more Maryland fans. Maybe not in general, but more excited to watch their team play.
No doubt.
For sure.
I mean,
there was a contingent. Sorry to interrupt. But there was a contingent of Syracuse fans here that were like doing their thing. But Kevin Willard has re-injected life into this program, and I know you guys talked about the dichotomy of these two coaches and how different they are in terms of where their product is right now. But the fan bases play a large part in it. Like all you have to do, if you're Syracuse, is try to get a little bit of optimism. And, there's all this talk about outside noise with all these players recently and stuff like that. But the noise was inside today because Maryland has momentum as a program.
Think about the fan bases, or 10 years ago, Syracuse was dubbed as New York's team for a long time. I don't really care how many people Maryland has in New York City in terms of alumni base. I mean, sure. Yeah, there are a lot of alumni there, but there's also a lot of SU alumni there. I mean, there's really no reason that you shouldn't be competing. I mean, this is an in-state game for you, downstate or not. Like, to see Maryland dominating the crowd, like you're saying, sure, like maybe they edge out the Syracuse fan base, but it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about 17,000 people at the Georgetown game last week. Clearly, the fan base is understandably upset right now, and the direction in terms of the team isn't clear, so you're not getting that support. And if that's not going to continue to just kind of compound on and be an exponential factor in terms of negativity surrounding the program, I don't know what it is. Because if you have players who come here expecting a jam-packed dome, like certainly one of the selling points for Syracuse basketball is the dome. We talked about it. Adam mentioned that earlier.
It's like the selling point.
Right. If you don't have that, like all of a sudden you don't have Jim Boeheim anymore. What do you have? Like that fan base is a huge part of the equation.
Yeah, you don't have a lot, right? It's kind of this. It's an identity crisis because I think for so long
that's a good way to put it.
You were defined by Boeheim, and you could kind of cover up those other issues by being like, oh, we have Boeheim at the helm, and Boeheim this, Boeheim that. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the last 3-4 years of the Boeheim regime were not that great for Syracuse measures either.
No,
so this was a downward trend. Besides that 2021 miracle run, I mean, they maybe shouldn't have even got into March Madness that year.
Right, that's the thing.
It's been a downward trend, and maybe this is not me trying to go up to bat for Coach Autry and try to defend him from all this criticism, but maybe he just picked things up at the wrong time. Maybe he's inheriting a program that was already on the decline before. That being said, I think this Maryland team, it proves, they got their 5-star freshmen. They were able to go through the portal. Why not Syracuse? And sometimes that, maybe that comes down to talent evaluation in the portal and knowing what you want to fill out. Comes down to team GM and coach working together to get NIL money. But ultimately, the identity of the Syracuse program is right now that it has no identity. It's every single game we're hearing the players say, oh, we don't really have an offensive identity right now. Or the coach would be like, we're trying to find out who we are on the defensive side of the ball. Well, you're a good bit of the way through the season.
Breaking news, ACC play starts next week.
You better find out who you are, and if not, you better try to pretend that you know what you are and try to try to force something. This team has taken a lot less threes lately, right? They're like, okay, we're not good at the 3-point shot. Okay. We'll post up Eddie Lampkin every once in a while. How about that?
I mean, he only had 9 points today. I don't understand why, and he was 4 for 10. I don't understand why he's not getting the ball every single possession, if that's going to be your identity.
There's such a massive difference between the skill level of Derek Queen and Julian Reese compared to Eddie Lampkin down low. I don't even think that it's close there.
Well, that's a whole new issue then, because you brought in Eddie Lampkin as like the leader of this team, your guy who's played in March Madness, who's supposed to will you back to the tournament because of his veteran experience. Now we're talking about he can't match up against a freshman.
Well, Derek Queen is a lottery pick who's already NBA caliber, which is what Willard talked. Like I think you can throw him on an NBA floor right now, and he's able to at least be competent. You said something a moment ago, Jonah, that it reminded me of a conversation that I saw on Twitter a few days ago, which I think is interesting to bring up here. If anyone has thoughts on this at home, you can call in at 315-443-2011. Adam Gatkin and Luke Burgess breaking things down here on the double overtime until 4 p.m. We've got Jonah Weintraub, our reporter, in the Barclays Center right now. But you brought up how that 2021 Sweet 16 run kind of was like the one thing of the last few years of the Boeheim that era that were good. And that was an 11 seed that year that made the tournament, barely made it in, and then they went on a mini Cinderella run to the Sweet 16. Was that bad for the program in the long run? Because that's what I've seen a lot of people saying recently on social media, that season made the athletic department think that they're still in this same era and that they can get it done now. Like, was that bad for the future of this team, that 2021 run?
I don't know if it was necessarily bad for the team, but I remember you guys talking about a couple minutes ago, talking about the Autry situation, that this has become, and kind of mentioning something along the lines of, like, hey, the football program made a change after they realized their head coach wasn't getting it done in Dino. Well, again, that took a ton of time, and you were like, oh, I wouldn't expect Wild Hack to be that, timid about it. I don't know, man. I mean, look, at this rate, it's like where do you go from here? And that's kind of the question I think many of the SU faithful were left with in the past few
Plenty
weeks.
of our callers have come in and asked that question today.
Yeah, and then leaving the stadium, like everyone in the media room is kind of, like, I think one question was asked where it's like, where do you go from here? Because ultimately you've basically won no meaningful games in the non-conference schedule. You're going to an ACC that's unbelievably weak overall, and so unless you beat Duke, beat Carolina, you won't even sniff the tournament at this point.
I think the tournament's, to be honest,
It's over.
pretty much out of the question.
Exactly.
It is out of it, unless they win the ACC tournament, which I don't even know if they're going to make it.
So this team is already having trouble. It's already a pain to get this team engaged on the court right now in these games that do matter.
What happens when you have nothing to play for?
And that's what scares me. Is
yeah.
This might not be rock bottom.
And I said that earlier. I think that it can go down from here.
And Autry said it was the worst loss of his coaching career, but I was up in the seats watching this the entire time. There's no reason. Maryland's a good three-point shooting team. They're not amazing, and they're a great defensive team.
Well, they're unranked. But they're going to play ranked teams. SU's going to play ranked teams this year.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
And there's so many factors that just, it's so many of the factors that are wrong with SU right now are almost unfixable. It's ingrained in the DNA of this team, and it's you almost want to put it in a washing machine and just get a fresh wash on it, have it come out and smell like the detergent and all that, Everything just feels it feels like putting Band-Aids on top of a stab wound or something. It's how many small changes can you make before you realize that something is fundamentally wrong with the way that this program is trending? And I think that today's game was probably a bigger reminder of that than any this season and maybe ever under Autry, because as opposed to these other ranked teams that they're playing Maryland today, a team that was in their shoes in the same level basically a year ago, and the year-to-year difference is remarkable between these two teams. One has gotten to a nationally ranked level probably in the coming weeks, and a Big Ten contender probably, and then the other is going to be fighting for an ACC tournament spot.
Yeah. Luke, by the way, is very much enjoying the Christmas music.
Yeah, Jonah, you sure you're not in Times Square right now? You already left the Barclays Center. That's what it sounds like.
I hope the FCC doesn't get us for this. We're in the Nets arena, and they have to get the Nets dancers ready for a holiday game tonight against the Jazz. Doubleheader here. I didn't even know that was happening.
So have they changed the court over yet?
Yeah, they did change the court, so
Wow.
it's the Nets
Quick work.
logo at center court.
Shout
Mariah
out
Carey.
to all the hardworking men and women who are changing the court over. Did a great job getting ready for today.
Working harder than the Syracuse team did today.
I guess so. Jonah, before we let you go, there's something else that just came to my mind. Because we've been talking about how you said that how Autry said that this was the worst loss that he's seen. All of these really bad losses, when we think about them, have come outside of the dome. Last year at Wake Forest was awful. At Duke, at UNC, those were all blowout losses. The Tennessee game, this one today. Syracuse plays Wake Forest. I know there's a game before that, Bucknell, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit. But
I don't think we're
the
talking
Wake
about
Forest
Bucknell.
game is, of course, the one that's important because it's the next time this team plays a quality opponent. And that is a true quality Wake Forest team that beat Michigan earlier this year, beat a good Michigan team who's now ranked. If this game, if we see a similar result against Wake Forest on New Year's Eve that we saw today, based on kind of the energy that you could feel from the Syracuse fans walking out after that game, and just everything that's happened, if there's a home game and it's this bad, I mean, do you expect boos start to come down on Autry? Was it that tense towards the end? I don't even know what would happen because we haven't seen anything that bad happen at home. All the bad losses at home have really been close.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if something like that happened. And I know that you guys said you were letting me go soon, but it's been such a pleasure being on here. I do want to say one thing though.
Sure.
Kevin Willard mentioned that Jaquan Carlos, he had a lot of sympathy for him because he's the only guy on this team that can handle a ball. And I wanted to say that I know that you guys were being a little hard on JC, and look, he had his bad day today, but I will say, really unfair position for him to be in general.
Oh yeah, I mean he works his tail off. I mean he played 40 minutes today. I mean that is the fact that he has the cardio to do that coming into the Power 4 level 11 games in is honestly impressive to me.
And so I guess
in the right situation, I think he'd be very good. Jonah, just to be clear.
What I want to segue that into though is that if SU is able to have a Maryland-esque turnaround in the coming years, let's hope that we look back and say, you know what, at least guys like Jaquan Carlos suited up and were able to compete for 40 minutes in these type of games, like Donnie Freeman was able to compete, because this is a non-competitive team right now, and the truth of the matter is that that might be all they're remembered for, but my goodness, I mean, look, it's not like these guys are all just hanging their heads. It's a tough battle out there, especially today, but it was definitely one that these guys wanted to win, maybe if they didn't play like it.
Well, thank you very much, Jonah. We really appreciate it. I think that's a good way for us to end this before we go to break, of saying it's not all Carlos's fault. He's put in a bad position. I think we both
when you
agree
have to
with
play
that.
40 minutes and your coach says after the game, there's no other option, I mean, that's
you
a
gotta
terrible
just feel
position.
bad for him.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again, Jonah, for joining us. Hope that you make it back safe after this brutal one, 87-60 loss for the Orange against Maryland. We're up against our final break here on the double overtime. We'll be with you for the next about 15 minutes, but we're going to step aside. When we come back, we've got our final words of the afternoon.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. You can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
The Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at waer.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Gillespie goes right to left, tosses to Reese down low, and he slams it home. Gillespie with the float pass, Reese right down the alley. Julian Reese with the first 4 points for Maryland in the second half, already up 30 just a minute in to the second half.
A very pretty call from our guy, Jordan Leonard, downstate at the Barclays Center in Syracuse's 87-60 loss. Unfortunately, the action on the court that he was doing play-by-play for, not as pretty. Luke Burgess and Adam Godkin here with you for about the next 13 minutes on the double overtime. The Orange absolutely demolished in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center. We got our final words. I'll start things off here, Adam. I think that Syracuse is going to miss the ACC tournament. The tournament has been expanded. There's 18 teams now in the ACC. The bottom 3 teams in the conference missed the tournament. J.J. Starling, at best, comes back in mid-January. That's what we've heard. But I don't really think that he's going to be back in mid-January because injuries like that, there's a rehab involved. There's working back involved. I do understand it's his non-shooting hand that is broken, but he's still got a wrap on it. So he hasn't started practicing. He's got to get his conditioning back. He can run, but he can't play basketball with a broken hand. Adrian Autry can say whatever he wants, but you're not going to play defense with a broken hand. There's a lot to work on right now. I don't think that J.J. Starling coming back 2 weeks into ACC play is going to be enough to salvage you a spot. Without him, there's an argument that Syracuse is one of the worst teams in the conference. But I definitely think they are not outside that bottom 3. And I think this year, they're going to miss the ACC tournament, and it's going to have to spark some change because right now, things are simply not good enough.
I agree with you that Syracuse will miss the ACC tournament. That kind of runs right into my final word that I don't think that Syracuse wins 10 games this year.
Oof.
I don't think that this team is going to win.
When you look at the rest of the schedule, that is
games. What that would mean, by the way, if they don't win 10 games, that would mean that they finish 9-22 at best. That'd be the 5th worst winning percentage in program history, the worst since 1962. They've only been below 500 once in the last 55 years. And I think that this team is going to finish at best 9-22 this season. To put this into perspective, Michael Jordan wasn't alive the last time that this team was this bad. John Bon Jovi, Tom Cruise, Derek Coleman, these people you think of as older celebrities, big names, they weren't even alive the last time that Syracuse would have had a season that bad. And yes, J.J. Starling is out, and maybe things can get better with him, but what today's game showed me more than anything is that this team just doesn't have the fight. It doesn't have the passion that it takes to win ACC games. You got to dig deep when things get tough. And today showed me, as so many other games have this season, that when they're in a tight game at home against Boston College and they're up by 3 in the final couple minutes, they're just not going to have what it takes to pull out with a win. Couldn't do it against Georgetown. Couldn't even compete today against Maryland. Syracuse will not win 10 games this season. And this is in a bad ACC. Right. They would have to win. They'd have to beat Bucknell and win 3 games in conference just to get to 9 wins. They'd have to beat Bucknell and win 4 ACC games to get to 10. And I just don't see a world where it happens. I don't see a world where this team can win those games. If you can barely beat Lemoyne and Youngstown State and Colgate at the beginning of the season, and we're at the end of December, and absolutely none of those problems have been solved, then how can you beat Boston College? How can you beat Cal? How can you beat Georgia Tech or Miami or Virginia Tech? How can you beat those bad teams in the ACC if you could barely beat bad teams without J.J. Starling and nothing's gotten better? I just don't see it. I don't see a world in which this team right now can win 10 games this season.
The more you look at it and you look at the ACC schedule, the more unlikely it honestly seems. Like I want to say that's far-fetched, but Florida State, much better than people expected. Georgia Tech is maybe one of the only teams that is in competition to be worse than Syracuse in the ACC.
Virginia Tech got destroyed by St. Joe's today, and we do know that is a good St. Joe's team. Saw them in the Legends Classic.
Virginia
Syracuse
Tech, maybe you have a
still.
chance. I mean, like Virginia, SMU, Pitt, North Carolina, BC, Duke. Stanford's 9-2. Clemson's ranked. You already lost to Notre Dame. Louisville has resurged. I totally see. I could see a world where they win 11 games, very realistically. Maybe I'm not saying that your final word is super far fetched, but I think it's super realistic to be they could win 11 games this year.
They'd have to win the 50-50 games, and they've done absolutely nothing.
There's nothing on the resume
right
exactly. There's nothing on the resume right now to show you that you should have any confidence in them winning a close game against an ACC team.
They did it against Lemoyne and Colgate and Youngstown and Cornell. They won close games then, but they tried their best to lose them.
Notre Dame right now. Let's be real frank here, because they already have played. We've already got one stamp on the resume, right?
Against the bad ACC team that played a very bad game that day.
And it played without their best player.
Yes, they were also without their best player.
Offensively carries that team.
He is more important to them than J.J. Starling is to Syracuse.
100%. And Notre Dame was picked to finish 10th in the ACC at the beginning of the year. Syracuse was picked to finish 11th. And I don't really see a world if you're losing to a team. I mean, there's 18 teams in the ACC. Marcus Burton makes up for probably like 30% of the scoring for Notre Dame when he's healthy. I mean, that's got to drop them down to like 15, 16 minimum. So if you can't beat that bottom level team, when they played bad, I don't like that's why I think the evidence is there that unless there's some serious turnaround, serious improvement, that is a conversation that you have to have. Like,
we have Anthony Bialy responding to one of our tweets saying that if the coach can't even get saying a coach can't even get the lineup right is usually an exaggeration. In Autry's case, it really happened. That's I think we can continue to go back to that. Of if you can't even get the lineup right,
I think it just shows that the team is not locked in.
No,
right?
Not at all.
Like if the coaching staff is not locked in, like you haven't played in a week. You should be like jumping out of bed, like ready to go, fired up. Like, yeah, I get to play like a Division I basketball game today in an NBA arena.
I get to prove everyone wrong.
Exactly.
There's all of this outside noise, which, I mean, look, when you're 5 and 6, it's the outside noises. I mean, we are it, but
5 and 6 in
the outside noise is correct.
Oh,
like
right
at
now,
this point,
no doubt.
like it's not people. It's not your, I don't know why I think of it this way, but like Philadelphia Eagles fans who win 12 in a row or however many in a row they've won and still think that they need to fire Nick Sirianni. This isn't fans of a team that's doing good, of even like the Syracuse football team this year when they start off at a good record and people were still picking them apart being negative. Like, this is a bad team. This outside noise is all absolutely justified.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't that be giving you motivation to go win?
Exactly. Like, you expect... I just think... I can't understand how, when the season has started the way it has, it's been acknowledged, why can't anyone beyond Donnie Freeman and a collection of others throughout the game give a little bit more defensively? And if Chris Bell is not going to give you anything defensively, which, like, basically just par for the course at this point, I mean, he played 17 minutes today. Eddie Lampkin, like, is okay defensively. He got 10 boards today, but 6 on the defensive glass, but, like, he doesn't really, like, he's not a game changer defensively.
Not at all.
Jaquan Carlos, I know that we said there's no other ball handling options, but when your point guard is as much of a liability as he is defensively, I just don't understand how you can keep running him out there. Like, you just have to keep mixing and matching lineups.
How do you feel about, in terms of changing a lineup?
I don't think there's any solution.
So there's only
whatever you're going to ask me, I'm going to tell you now.
There's only one guy on the team right now who was a starter last year who's still starting. And it's Chris Bell.
Yeah.
Does benching him for the first time and putting in Lucas Taylor, who I don't think is any worse?
Well, Lucas Taylor started games, and it's basically been nothing.
But starting him for Bell, because there's nothing either way.
He played more minutes today than Chris Bell, and he had 6 points.
A statement in the fact of, like,
it doesn't
makes
matter.
them.
They can't even get the starting lineup right.
Yeah, like that doesn't. You don't think that does anything mentally?
Maybe Adrian Autry will accidentally put him in the starting lineup next time out, and then they can figure it out.
I feel like there just needs to be like a reality check. Start Kyle Cuff and Lucas Taylor and just change everything.
Just start Peter Majstorovic.
Start Peter Majstorovic and just one game.
Or what? Then they're just going to get blown out again.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
going to change anything, so you might as well make a statement, right?
I don't think that's worth it. I don't think the extreme... I mean, these are their best options, but the thing is, if you just take what the team has put on paper, you would think they were a horrible team. The talent is there. I mean, Chris Bell is a good three-point shooter.
Chance Westry should be fully healthy by now, right? If he was playing back against Tennessee, that's almost a month ago.
They've got to. That's crazy.
We're beyond the point of why.
That might be a bit of an exaggeration. It's been about 2.5 weeks, but they need.
He played against Tennessee, actually.
Yeah,
oh my gosh,
2.5 weeks.
Time. Oh
yeah.
But yes,
they've got to get some new faces in there. It's like
too bad you can't trade in college basketball in the middle of the season.
Well, they'd be sellers at the moment if there was a trade deadline. It's obviously not good. I think they're going to struggle to compete down the line in the ACC. I think you have to go out against Bucknell, and you have to dominate, and then you have to go out against Wake Forest, and you just have to show effort. I mean, because at the end of the day, the sun's going to come up tomorrow. It's been doom and gloom. Hard not to be doom and gloom with the way that this one went today. Syracuse loses 87-60, but what else are you supposed to say? Outcompeted from minute one.
You just said that they have to dominate Bucknell. Is there any reason that you think that they could? Like any reason
Not
at
really,
all?
but you have to. sun comes up tomorrow, right? You got 7 more days to prepare for this game. If they don't look ready for that game, I mean, I don't know what you say.
Bucknell's not a very good team. They play at Gonzaga tonight, so that's a team who's coming all the way from the West Coast. Guess the line. How much do you think Gonzaga is favored by Bucknell?
17.
34.5.
Oh, my God.
So it'll be interesting to see how much Syracuse
should
is
play
favored.
well against Bucknell, hopefully. It's Christmas time. It's holiday season, but we've got plenty more action coming for you broadcast-wise. 6 days away, Syracuse football, a team with a little bit more optimism surrounding the program. They play against Washington State in the Holiday Bowl. That game is December 27th, 8 p.m. kickoff, 5 p.m. on the West Coast. We got an hour-long McClure Remodeling countdown to kickoff. That starts at 7 o'clock. Double overtime will go all the way up until midnight. Washington State doesn't have many players on the floor or on the field.
They've lost 20.
Syracuse basketball, we already mentioned it, against Bucknell next Saturday. That's 7 days from today. Tip-off is at 2 p.m. McClure Remodeling countdown to tip-off is at 1:30. Double overtime runs up until 6 o'clock with Austin Barrick and Jish Sokolsky. For our entire crew here today, some thank yous to hand out. Andrew Delapiana, Sam Reese, helping us produce. Our guy, Gino Antamarino, pressing all the right buttons back over in our control room. Our reporter, Jonah Weintraub, gave some fantastic insight. Our WAER Sports Talk desk, Josh Richardson. Absolute grind of a day for Josh Richardson and a week. He was helping us with Sports Night as well last night. Nick King, remote, and Jason Stalakis, remote. We appreciate all you guys and all the work that you do to make this broadcast seamless as possible. Syracuse destroyed in the Big Apple. 87-60, the final. Maryland dominates. That's all we got. Talk to you next week.